eventful part of it. And we'll be discussing this with our panelists today. Of course, you can join us. You know, our Twitter handle is AMLiveNTV. AMLiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal. Already, we have with us Dr. James Yukal, Member of Parliament from Seme, who is here with us this morning. It's been a while, sir, and good to see you this morning. How are you doing? Fantastic. So, looking at the past week, what will be your estimation of course, the murder of Sharon and, you know, a very chilling event on what really was happening, and so far, this we know it is under investigation. I don't know what has been your take on this.
My take on this is it shows several aspects of our society where we haven't really got things right. Starting from what everybody is talking about is the issue and the morals of the issue of sponsorship. It's something people have been talking about relatively casually.
Yes.
And with always a light touch. But now we can see it's a serious matter.
Yes.
It exists. And therefore it raises the question of how we raise our children, that they get into these things and take it too seriously. The other aspect is the murder itself, whatever the morals of the people involved, the student involved, it cannot to be accepted, totally unacceptable. But there's a third element of it that probably is not coming out. How are our students coping in the universities? I remember far back when I went to university, there was full accommodation and a lot of costs were taken care of by, by the government. Now, this now is almost all gone. There is help, of course, but it doesn't cover everything. And so a lot of students are fending for themselves. Some come from very poor families and they can hardly afford. And so I think girls are likely to be drawn in this. I remember when this thing started of expanding the universities, I was teaching at the university, and the argument that came is we should not tie the number of students admitted into university with the number of beds. That the purpose of a university is, of course, to train students apart from research. That must be the most important. And so it was argued students can find their own accommodation. Even the meal arrangements were definitely much better than now, and students are actually cooking in, so to speak, in the dormitories and also residence. So they are under stress. We haven't really looked at that. We have taken far too many than our institutions can afford, and so they're in the loose. And again, we are in a society where how you get your money is not an issue. It's a bigger picture.
Thank you.
But all said, this is an unacceptable crime.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. And of course, we shall be drilling on that and a raft of other issues as well. Fuel debates and taxation of it remains to be a very thorny issue as well, and we shall be looking at that. But before we drill deeper, as always, look at the dailies. And this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Motive in students' cruel death is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation today. Investigations both says arrests of key suspects to be made soon. Stab wounds through mother's abdomen dealt lethal blow to 7-month-old fetus. Police say probe will not spare anyone and arrests will be made soon. Prosecutor Haji promises there will be no sacred cows in quest for justice. And we'll be giving you all this also in the news bulletin this morning. And coming this week, demos. Stop speculating. Sharon's former husband Bernard Okuta says matter is too emotive for him to comment. Also, 8 number of stabs wounds on Sharon's body, according to pathologists. Also, solidarity demos. 4 women representatives from Nyanza saying they will picket in honor of the slain student. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation today. And this is a face of the bereaving husband there. Sharon's estranged husband Bernard Okuta saying this matter is too emotive for me. I would rather leave it to the police and now the investigators to find out what happened. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Also, secrets of dirty money deals at Imperial Bank. As this troubled bank as at the heart of Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mbeta Mwilu's troubles breathed its last, some of its managers were busy aiding its death New evidence seen by the nation shows inside the troubling portraits of an institution not only used as a conduit by some of its directors to siphon money from customers, but also where illegal withdrawals were done even after it went under. You have this story continuing on page 2 of the Daily Nation today. Viva Zarika, Kenyan boxing stars drubbing off Mexican Yemi last weekend will spur local talent. This is on page 3 of the Daily Nation this Monday. Let's see what we have on the front page of the Standard, and this is what you're waking up to today. Uhuru back amid crisis talks on fuel. The president's return has been eagerly awaited by Kenyans. We expect that he will trigger suspension of the 16% value-added tax on petroleum products that resulted in a countrywide fuel crisis last week. You have the story continuing on page 8 of the Standard this morning. Also, House Speaker Justin Muturi described last week's deliberations at a crisis meeting in Parliament as work in progress, saying nothing has been firmed up yet. Also, Treasury CS Henry Rotich said last week that a series of meetings on the finance bill had been lined up. He promised a solution soon. Also, we have a quote here from Raphael Tuju, Jubilee Party Secretary General, saying if Parliament rejects a taxation regime, then they have to remove some budgetary allocations. That's what we have as a quote from, or as a bite from him. Also, Mombasa meeting is between Parliament, Controller of Budget and Treasury on budget implementation. This is what John Baddy, Minority Leader, National Assembly, is saying. That is on the front page of the Standard this morning. Let's see what we have on the front page of the Star, and this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the Star. DPP Haji Obado is not above the law, it says. This is what we have on the front page of the Star this morning. Governor's PA Michael Oyamo to face charges relating to Sharon's abduction and murder. Politicians and civil society activists pile pressure on DCI George Kinoti to speed up investigations. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Also, we have a representation here. This is the Nyanza women representatives Pamela Odhiambo and Gladys Wanga visit Sharon's mother Melida Auma and father Douglas Otena Shuse at the family home yesterday. This is what we have on the front page of the Star this morning. Also still on the front page of the Star, how the state paid 6.6 million shillings for Uhuru Youth Day broadcast in Kisii. That is, of course, you remember the International Youth Day. How the state paid 6.6 million shillings for Uhuru Youth Day broadcast in Kisii. That is a story that you want to follow on page 6 of the Star. Also, DP Ruto defends VAT as Muturi sets to meet CS Rotich again today. That is what we have also on the front page of the Star this morning. And child abuse. Cruel teachers are worse bullies than fellow students, says UN report. This is on page 10 of the Star this morning. Let's continue this morning. We see what we have also on the front page of Taifa Leo, and this is what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. DPP tayari kunasa Obado. Haji yasema washukiwa wa mauaji ya Sharon watakabiliwa licha ya vyeo vyao. Wanasiasa waandaa maandamano Migori. That story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Let's continue and see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily, and this is your splash today. But before we head there, right, let's just continue. I shall show you also what we have on the front page of the People Daily. Eyes on shilling as 152 billion shillings IMF cushion ends. This is what we have as a splash here, and it says the shilling could be left exposed to the turbulence of foreign exchange markets and global economic shocks should the International Monetary Fund terminate Nairobi's access to 152 billion shillings precautionary facility that expires in 4 days. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Let's continue and see what we have on the front page, or on as a side, but there on the front page of the Business Daily. Mandera's 3.2 billion shillings road deal rocked by fraud claims is another story. And you can see here murder probe warning. Director of Public Prosecution Nurdin Haji receiving a report on extrajudicial killings from the Haki Africa Executive Director Hussein Khalid. at the organization's offices yesterday. Mr. Haji warned Kenyans against speculating about last week's murder of Rongo University student Sharon Otenum and vowed not to spare anyone linked to death. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily today also as well. Safaricom managers get 2.3 billion shillings share bonuses or share bonus. High-performing Safaricom managers have over the past 4 years received for free 84.1 million shillings shares with a current market value of 2.3 billion shillings as part of their compensation package. You can follow that story on page 4 of the Business Daily. I want to show you what we have on the ticker as well. Loan defaults hits manufacturing. The labor-intensive manufacturing sector posted the highest growth in loan defaults in the first 3 months of the year. Central Bank of Kenya reports shows this. And also the digit 11 billion shillings value of corporate bond terms that EABL, I should say, breached. This is on page 7. Samburu Turkana post high growth in insurance uptake. Samburu and Turkana counties posted the largest percentage growth in the uptake of insurance policies in 2017. An indication of a shift by pastoralists and farmers to tackle perennial challenges brought about by drought, disease and floods. Also, deposit-taking SACCO's assets rise to 442 billion shillings. That is what we have also on page 19 of the Business Daily this morning. Let's see if we can quickly lift what we have on the front page of the People Daily this morning. Try to just lift it up for you quickly for you to see if it is here, but it seems to elude me as well this morning. But we can cross over now to Tanzania, where we have the Citizen for You. EAC mounts new strategy as FDIs into region drops. The EAC will embark on another bid to woo investors during the forthcoming regional business conference following a sharp drop in foreign direct investments. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Also, we have John Pombe Magufuli saying land disputes should be tackled jointly. That story continues on page 2. And why commercial buildings in Dar es Salaam are losing their luster. That story on page 2 of the East African or the Citizen this week. Also still in Tanzania, we have the Mwananchi. Diwani alipwa mishahara miezi 20 akiwa mahabusu. That is what we have on the front page of Mwananchi. We can cross over now to Rwanda, where we have the New Times in Rwanda. Gender equality activists upbeat over next house. This is what we have on the front page of the New Times. Also, this is in light of what just they had last week with the elections, where we saw many women also being or gaining or taking or winning those elective seats. Women rights activists have welcomed the fact that the country's next chamber of deputies will still have more women than men, explaining that it will help the lower house continue to enact laws that are gender sensitive and respond to society's most important issues. This story continues on page 3 of the New Times. Also, we can see new drive to end HIV/AIDS infections among children to be launched. This will be on page 5 of the New Times in Rwanda. Also, local government women network launched, and you can see here the Ministry for Gender and Family Promotion and Local Government Esperance Nyirasafari and Francis Kaboneka, respectively, with the newly elected head of Rwanda Network of Women in Local Government, Marie Chantal Rwakazina, and the Ralga chairperson, that is Innocent Owimana, with the logo of the newly launched network yesterday. That is what we have on the front page of the New Times in Rwanda. The East African this week, this is what it is holding for you. And how pilot averted horror collision in Kenyan airspace. Yeah, last minute, Ethiopian authorities furious with Kenyan traffic controllers. You have the full report on page 4. You have the flight details here as well. You can read all that. The full report is on page 4. Just to give you a synopsis of what was happening, Italian leisure airline news, Boeing 767-306, our flight number NOS252 registration number. Of course, all the details are here, and this is how they could have collided here. But you have all the gritty details of this, the airspace safety, on page 4 of the East African this week. Also, dark clashes with oil farms over gas. A standoff over a profit sharing will affect the proposed $30 billion natural gas production project. So Tanzania's LNG project suffered another setback this week after President John Magufuli accused the international oil and gas companies of seeking huge profits at the expense of the country's development. This story continues on page 6 of the East African this week. Also, sidebar there, conflict over Great Lakes resources, colonial boundaries and oil discoveries fuel tensions. This is on Outlook, and you have this on page 23, 26 and 27. Remember also Migingo is on this as well. And Grand Dam project goes into brownout. Delays are multiplying, leaving new regional lines in limbo. Rwanda's listed banks on a roll. Automation pays off as loan volumes rise. All that on page 49, where they are looking at the markets. Let's continue and we see what we have also on the front page of the magazines as well. The Nairobi Law Monthly is carrying this particular headline for you this month: taking no prisoners. Exclusive interview with DCI George Kinoti, Uhuru's graft gladiator, talks about the honor of public office, his mission, work ethic and thoughts on threats to the Kenyan states. You can follow that story inside the latest edition of the Nairobi Law Monthly. Also, we do have the Nairobi Business Monthly as well. And this is what it's holding for you. Makueni Rising, testimony of the power of people-centered development. Right, the ascendant Makueni. This is what is the splash on the front page of the Nairobi Business Monthly. Of course, this September edition. I want to show you the editorial cartoons that we do have here. And this is what we have inside the Star today. Foreign experts managing us because we cannot manage foreign debts. And you can see there Uhuru in knots, right? And it's all about the loans and who is holding, of course, the rope. That is the International Monetary Fund. Also, we have, this is what we have inside the People Daily. Right, we have the ESCC training their focus on tenderpreneurs who are walking away with millions in bribes, or they're bribing, right? Tougher bank rules as well. It's a tightrope for the tenderpreneurs. Let's see what we have also inside the Standard today, according to Gado, and this is what he's drawn for us as well. Out of stock, but I'm open to suggestions. Right, this is all about the fuel crisis that we're in as a country right now. But of course, you can see the person who's posing here is, of course, that fat cat, the corrupt people in a government. Right, this is what has been drawn by Gado. Let's see what also we have. Trying to see if I can grab hold of what we have inside the Daily Nation, according to Iger, but it seems I didn't actually put it. But I'll show you much later in the course of the program. So those are your dailies, and of course you can grab a copy of the latest magazine as well, the Nairobi Law Monthly, and of course also the Nairobi Business Monthly as well. But for now, let's see what we have in the highlights. The elusive quest for answers in a murder most foul. Museveni warns other countries not to meddle in Uganda's affairs. And Egypt sentences 75 former members of Muslim Brotherhood to death. Hello, good morning. I'm Debarl Inea. Now, Director of Public Prosecutions Nuruddin Haji has advised politicians to keep off investigations into the murder of Rongo University student Sharon who was pregnant, responding to the clamor from the political class for the suspects in the case to be hanged, drawn and quartered. Haji says the due process of the law must be followed, and the temptation to litigate the matter in the court of public opinion based on unsubstantiated claims resisted at all costs, I should say. The irony is that the same political class has accused Haji and the investigative authorities in general of playing games with the public on the matter, accusing them of dragging their feet and bringing their masterminds to book in the face of irrefutable evidence.
I think they should keep off and shut up and wait for the investigations, because that is also undue influence and coercion, I think. So politicians should keep off.
These people, we should hang them, tie them on a tree somewhere in Nairobi National Park, so that they are eaten by wolves and eaten by hyenas. Hata kama ni nani akiangai, nobody deserves to die like this.
Postmortem inasema Sharon alidungwa visu mara 6, akadungwa mtoto tumbo. Kwa hivyo mimi nasema DPP Nurdin Haji Kinoti, wacheni kucheza na Wakenya walio wengi.
Let's not speculate. Because again, if you speculate and if there's a lot of public pressure to get it in a certain way, then we are also, it's just the same as it's mob justice. Investigations sometimes take time. You have to be patient. You cannot expect for us to have answers and to prosecute immediately a murder occurs. There is a process. There's DNA to be looked into. There are several theories that have been put forward. Those two have to be looked into. One thing that I want to assure that we have no sacred officials that will be left. Whether you're a governor or not, you'll have to face the law.
Let me tell you the truth. Oyamo and those other suspects will not be sacrificed. They are the people who committed the murder, yes, but they are people who sent them to commit the murder. I'm praying that tomorrow we are not going to see some of those small, helpless boys being brought to court and whoever sent them is not with them. We will not accept that.
Still on the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, has assured that his office, together with that of the Inspector General of Police and the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, are investigating reports of extrajudicial killings in Mombasa. The DPP, who has promised a report within 3 weeks, has made it clear that such actions contravenes the law and will not be condoned. Just this last week, police in Mombasa were hard-pressed to explain the execution of 3 youth branded thugs. Lobby group Haki Africa has presented the DPP with a list of 32 persons killed under suspicious circumstances, allegedly by the police since January.
I'm concerned that this is happening at the coast and other parts of the country. I'm concerned of the word extrajudicial because it has a connotation that maybe the government condones this. As far as I'm concerned, the government does not condone such killings. And if anything, if we had a better word, maybe it should be extra-governmental killings and not extrajudicial killings.
And NASA leader Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula have faulted the government for occasional defiance of court orders. The duo argued that despite the Bungoma High Court order to halt the 16% VAT on petroleum products, the government still continues to levy the charge in what they describe as show of impunity.
And if the Jubilee government is going to defy a court order, a legitimate court order, and the court order whether issued in Bungoma, in Garissa, in Turkana, in Migori, or wherever, is a court order. The government has a duty under the law, under the constitution, to obey each court order.
16% kwa mafuta. Jameni, mafuta sio luxury. Mafuta sio gari ya kifahari ambayo unaweza toza ushuru. Mafuta ni kitu kinaanza kwa jikoni ya mama na kinapita mpaka kwa kila mtu. Kwa budget policy statement, lazima wabunge wangeuliza, how do you intend to finance this? Sasa tumewekwa kwa kona mbaya. Na ndio kwa sababu sisi tunasema kwamba Uhuru, Mr. President, umetoka China, come home. Deal with this thing quickly.
The people of this country are carrying a heavy burden of public debt and carrying a heavy burden of a consequence of mismanagement of public affairs through disrespect for public resources in the way of corruption and outright theft of state resources.
Now, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has warned against foreign interference in the country's politics days after an opposition call for the United States to suspend military aid over the government's human rights record. Museveni also accused some unnamed foreign countries of seeking to influence the nation's politics by funneling assistance to the opposition through non-governmental organizations. Last week, the U.S. lawyer for opposition lawmaker Robert Kyagulanyi, a musician named Bobi Wine, called on the states to stop funding Uganda's military as a punitive measure against what Kyagulanyi said was torture by authorities in his country. Bobi Wine and fellow parliamentarian Francis Zaki says they were tortured by security forces while in detention in August.
It is important that external players refrain from interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. Interfering in the internal affairs of other countries is morally and practically wrong. Morally wrong because the question is, what superior intelligence do you have to think that you can understand the problem in my house better than we, the occupants? If there is a problem in our house, we, the occupants, will solve it. Keep out. There has been so much talk about the torture by the security forces of people like Honorables Bobi Wine and Zaki. This talk is in the media, in other non-court fora. Yet, these are matters in the courts of law. The questions in the minds of those who love fairness are the following. What if those allegations turn out to be false? How will the accusers, local and foreign, rectify the injustice they have done to the security forces? If any one of them implied or said that where I commented on the Arua events, since I was on the scene, I was telling lies, will I be entitled to damages?
And at least 19 people died in South Sudan on Sunday when a small aircraft carrying passengers from capital Juba to the city of Irol crashed. There were 22 people on board the flight that departed Juba International. with the panelists this morning. If you or you woke up with us at the top of the hour at 6 o'clock, of course, I introduced to you the Member of Parliament from Seme. This is Dr. James Jikal. Also joining us this morning, we have with us Governor Anyang' Nyong'o, who is the Governor for Kisumu. We do have with us as well Samuel Pogisio, who is a Senator from West Pokot. We have with us as well Jeremiah Kioni, who is a Member of Parliament from Daragwa. And I think that's all. We shall continue with the discussion. You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is our Twitter handle. AM Live NTV. Oh, Congo Wogeni. It's because you're in white, or is it cream today? I can't see you. Everyone is in black, at least in the dark suit. Congo Wogeni is a senator from, of course, Nyamira. Thank you very much for joining us this morning as well. Let's just look at the events, and we can begin with the Daily Nation and this a very harrowing and chilling story of what happened to Sharon so far. Motive in students' cruel death. This is what we have in the Daily Nation today. Stab wound through mother's abdomen dealt lethal blow to 7-month-old fetus. Police say probe will not spare anyone and the arrest will be made soon. Prosecutor Haji promises there will be no sacred cows in quest for justice. Maybe we can begin with Governor Anyang' Nyong'o. Of course, before we've had the Council of Governors coming to speak or hold brief for some of the governors, especially when they are arraigned in court. But surprisingly, they've been very mealy-mouthed about this particular incident of Sharon. And even before, we had the governor of Governor Korania as well, with cases of gun shooting. But we've not heard anything from the Council of Governors. So we wonder, how does the Council of Governors operate? Does it cherry pick on who to really speak about? And if a governor is embroiled in such a mysterious circumstances as this, then what is the role of the Council of Governors?
Morning, Debarl.
Morning to you. Morning. And good to see you.
Morning, Prof.
Well, first let me express my deep condolences to the family of Sharon and friends and relatives. This was really a terrible, tragical event that occurred to this young lady. I said so in Kisumu on Thursday, and I want to repeat it, that this is something that is really horrible. I don't know what has happened to the DNA of our people for the last couple of years. There seem to be more and more grisly murders that we see in the papers. This weekend alone, we can read about 4 or 5 in Nyeri, in Nairobi, and Sharon, and so on. One wonders whether it's something we are meeting.
All right. Prof.
But let me come back to the issue you raised. The Council of Governors doesn't have a criminal division. So when something which veers toward the criminality happens, we really can't comment, because the Council of Governors deals mainly with issues of devolution.
Right. Prof, I need just to sort out your microphone a bit. So we'll come back to you to just comment on that as well. But let's continue with Okongo Omogeni.
First, Debarl, just like Professor, I want to also register my sympathies and condolences to the family of Sharon, and also condemn, the brutal, cruel manner in which this young lady was killed, and I'd also hope that in the fullness of time, justice will be done. That at least the people who planned and executed this murder should face the full force of the law. I don't know, I can't speak for the governors, but I don't think the Council of Governors is in office to defend such heinous crime of murder. But Debarl, looking at the bigger picture, because when these things happen, our children, our daughters should learn, some lesson, that we should not pick the easy options in life. I mean, I really don't know whether what we read in the newspapers is true about Sharon, but the many young girls in our universities should know that you have to toil for, a long time, climb the ladder slowly. Finally, you will be there. You don't need to look for easy ways of making money so that you can live a good life. It's really sad, if at all, Sharon is a victim of good money that turns a relationship to become sour and lead to such kind of murder. But I think it's also a reflection of how rotten our society is, because even if you disagree, in the event that you are involved in a love affair that turns sour, I don't think this young lady deserved to die the way she died, especially when you just go through the autopsy report. You don't have to knife somebody 7 times, including trying to kill a 7-year-old fetus. I think it's a reflection of how our society has become so rotten that we do things that human beings ordinarily should really never do. So I want to urge the people who are in investigations to ensure that they go for the culprits, the people who planned and executed murder. And as a lawyer, I know that murder is not just about the person who was at the scene. It could also involve the person who has sent that person to go and kill. So the only way I think Kenyans can have some feeling of justice is if the culprits are brought to book, however senior they may be in society, whatever position they occupy. We just want to see that justice is done to this young girl. Just finally, you can imagine a family that has invested. This girl was in a private university. A family that has invested all its resources. I saw the household, you know, the compound of that young girl. The family was looking forward to this girl finishing her studies, coming back to help her parents, and she's just died like that. It's not fair, and we need to do something that can act as a deterrent to future deaths like this.
All right. Okay, let's hear from Senator Pogisio. Good morning.
Good morning, Debarl. Thank you, and good morning, colleagues and our viewers. This week has been really a troublesome week for Kenya, and I think the messaging from our media has been, of course, mixed. Coming out of the fuel crisis into Sharon, the whole time it's been Sharon's unfortunate murder. And like my colleagues, let me just begin by sending my condolences to the family, and also to say the same thing, that justice be done. I just heard the DPP say that no one will be spared, and therefore there will be no sacred cows, and that's very important for us in confirming that we need Kenya to be governed by the rule of law. It's difficult when you're dealing with a situation like this. It's a mixed thing, and yet you really need also to congratulate Kenyans who have made us proud recently, Zarika being one of them, and the Kenyan football team. But let me come to this particular issue, and I'm glad that governors have declared that they don't have a criminal division. They don't have to defend other governors because of the things they do. Neither do we as members of parliament. When members of parliament commit crime, they just treat it the same way as everybody else, except that there's certain only specific areas they cannot be arrested in. But the rest of the things will have to follow the law. I would like to declare that a lot of young people today admire the lifestyles that show opulence. And we've done it ourselves. We are the people who are showing them that opulence is what you need, you know. So, and again, we need to call for that lifestyle audit. Because looking at all these things, looks like there is a pool of money somewhere in this country that can be spent on anyone. Anyone. A pool of money that is unaccounted for, or somehow is able to move people to, you can even hire people to kill others. And I think that it looks to me like we need to tighten some of these loopholes where there is monies that can be used, flash monies which are just used like that. So I really do sympathize. I saw the family agony, but that's just an example. Sharon's case is the one which has been reported. There are many happening in many other places that are not being reported. And this is the kind of thing that must be. Sharon's death should help the country to deal with the particular issue, this particular issue of young students, young girls, particularly girls. It also happens to boys, by the way. Not much is reported. Young boys also who suffer the same fates. And so I am just basically saying that this morning we mourn Sharon, but let justice roll and let justice spread to everyone.
Thank you. Right, let's get back to Governor Anyang' Nyong'o in that regard. I think you'd started commenting on what I'd asked you earlier in regard to the Council of Governors.
Yes.
Commenting also on that.
Sorry,
yes.
My mic was not working.
Yes.
I was just saying that on Thursday last week, I expressed my shock and horror at what happened and sent my condolences to the family of Sharon, friends and relatives, and to Kenya as a whole. And the question you asked me what the Council of Governors has done, really, as I emphasized, the Council of Governors doesn't have a criminal division. So when something happens like that, which is perceived to be a crime or is a crime, it is better for the Council of Governors not to act as a council because it's not our responsibility. Individuals can express their opinions, but the Council of Governors as such cannot take a stand on an issue like this. It would be wrong, I think, in principle and in law. But secondly, the issue that my friend Pugisho has just talked about, and my friend Omogeni, there is a side to this thing, the sense of impunity. People seem to think that they can do things and get away because they can bribe their way through the police or criminal investigation agents. This has led to people doing all kinds of horrible things. And I think that investigations into this kind of thing should be very thorough, should be very objective, and should lead to the culprits being apprehended in court and dealt with thoroughly. And further, as Pugisho was saying, our young people should not live in a kind of dangerous life. I think when we were growing up, parents were very strict, schools were very strict, even universities were very strict in terms of bringing up people in character, body, mind, and character. Our high school prayer was having thy keeping this school, that his work may be thorough and his life joyful. That from it may go out men who, in their body, mind, and character. I think this idea of being trained to grow up properly in body, mind, and character is very important. And I hope that, as the Senator has said, all parents and teachers and those in charge of young people will emphasize this so that we have as little incidences of this as possible.
All right, thank you. Jeremiah Kioni, good morning.
Morning, Iba.
Yes.
And colleagues. And I don't think I can. I want to join my colleagues in sending my condolences to the family of Sharon. And it's really been a very sad week, a sad time to see the kind of things that we have witnessed through the week. And I can't agree with my colleagues more that we need to. I think the starting point is that our young people must be encouraged to live within their means, within their time. We must encourage them to know that you must go through the paces. You cannot jump the queue. You cannot jump into riches when you are still young. You must stop being enticed with money and good life. And again, as my colleagues have said, the earlier days there was a little bit more of discipline. I can't quite pin it down as to why we lost it, but the examples that we also give as readers, and especially those youthful Kenyans who are able to make it to leadership, those young people who are able to be elected or who are now being elected as members of parliament, members of the county assemblies, various positions in the country, I think must also demonstrate. One is that they should make sure that they get to those positions by demonstrating that they deserve them. Mm-hmm. Two is that once they are there, they should not give an impression that there is a quick way of getting things, getting to positions, other than working hard. I received, I think, 2 calls yesterday from members of my constituency And one was a young person, the other one was a parent of a young person. And all that they were telling me is that, you know, these days, unless you have somebody who can help you to acquire this, to get to this position, you cannot get it by yourself. And I was at pains trying to tell them that it's still possible to get to positions and to do things through merit, as opposed to being helped by persons in authority. And that culture is, I think, the one that is feeding into the narrative that you must also have somebody to give you money to do things that you ideally should not be doing at your age, get you to positions that perhaps you don't even deserve at your age. And that's feeding to all this, what we are seeing, and especially the young girls, and I want to agree with my colleagues who have also said the young boys also are getting to this. Last week, I attended a burial of a very young person in my constituency who died, not as a result of perhaps behaving badly, but again, a young person who was working hard, but was at the wrong place at the wrong time and was shot dead. So there are quite a number of such deaths that are very scary and are very worrying to us as Kenyans. And we need to look at it and see where is it that we lost it. I see one of the university dons at Kenyatta University trying to talk to the young people and telling them not to look for the so-called sponsors and to get contented with the little pocket money that they are given by their parents. And that's how other people have made it, and I want to echo his words. Let them just get used to eating, clothing, living within that little money that the parents can afford.
Thank you. Right, maybe I should just circle back to Prof a bit, because you mentioned about when we asked you about the Council of Governors, and you say you don't have a criminal division. A criminal division, yes. What about the economic crimes? When we have a governor like, you know, the governor of Bisua, Ojamong, who is being arraigned in court, and we have the Council of Governors coming to, you know, comment on that's not the way to handle a governor who is somewhat embroiled in corruption, so to speak. Isn't that economic crime? What is dramatically different with, or this is a different sort of crime?
No, economic crimes and these other crimes are different. Remember, I was chairman of Public Investments Committee.
But it still falls under the ambit of crime.
I mean, when we crafted the law on economic crimes, if you read the law very carefully, the investigation of economic crimes is a little bit different from these crimes, proper crimes so-called. Because in economic crimes, there is the issue of political responsibility as well as administrative responsibility. For example, in purchasing this cap in my county, it can be purchased in a department. I have no knowledge whatsoever that is being purchased, but I expect officers in my county to know what the laws are and what laws you have to follow to purchase the cap. There is also the procurement director, person really responsible for procurement. The governor does not really get involved in that. But once you find that something has gone wrong, then it is your responsibility to take action and discipline those people. For example, this about 3 chief officers of not following possible procedure in procurement. Okay. But sometimes things can go without you realizing something has happened. So when something like that happened and criminal investigation rushed to arrest a governor before they do the investigation, how the procurement was done, it's not fair. So in this case, what happened was that, yes, somebody found something had happened and rushed to arraign the governor in court before, first of all, doing the investigation as to who was actually responsible. That's the whole point. Because there's a chain of responsibility in performing government duties. The president, for example, may not know what's happening in Kenya Airways, but Kenya Airways is an institution in which the government has substantial investment and sits in the board. That's why when things went wrong in Kenya Airways, we in the Senate established a select committee on which I was chairman to find out, you know, where the ball dropped. It's very important to understand that economic crimes require a little bit more responsibility in investigating the chain of crimes rather than this one. Because this one, somebody is stabbed, somebody is dead, you immediately look for the person who held the knife or the person who sent them. It's much more straightforward.
Right, thank you. Lastly, let's just hear from Dr. James on this before we end up on, of course, the death of Sharon, the mysterious death of Sharon.
Well, as I said earlier, this thing has three aspects. Let me again pass my condolences and my sympathies to the family. But as my colleagues have said, there are three, in my view, about three aspects to this. There's crime that is diabolical, heartless, and with impunity, like nothing will happen to me. And that must be pointing to how we see our law enforcement institutions, that I can do this and get away with it. So that is a despicable crime. The other element is, as my colleagues have said, how are our children growing up and perceiving the society in which we live? We've said that our children should be content with what they have, but it's also important on how we parent them. As parents, we actually give the children the moral armor which they wear as they go out there in society. So we must also look at ourselves that in these circumstances, how do we endeavor to ensure that our children have the strength to do what is morally right and that they don't get into danger? And again, the third one is, what is the national ethos? You see the issue of corruption and crime all over. You look at the papers. That is the ethos, and that is the environment in which our children live. And then, so that affects it. And then the other bigger picture is the management of our universities. As I said earlier, people who are going to university now are really having a lot more adverse situations. And we have come to a policy that you do not tie the number of students you admit to the number of beds and hostels. This may be good in getting in more students, but it exposes particular students from poor families to a lot of hardship and can drive them to this.
Right,
so it has many issues that we have to look at.
Right, thank you. Right, when we circle back, we want to see also what has been happening as far as the fuel levy is concerned, the 16% that drawing a lot of flack from every quarter of this country. We shall dwell deeper on that because the president is back in the country. So will he really assent to this particular finance bill, the finance amendment bill that has come to his table right now? And of course, that will be such a relief of Kenyans as well. We shall be looking at that and a raft of other issues as well. Don't go away. Much more coming up on the other side of a break. Welcome back. You're watching This Is a Point here on AM Live, and we continue with the conversation with our panelists here. I'm holding court today with Dr. James Nyikal, who is a member of parliament from Seme. Also, we have with us Okongo Mogeni, the senator of Nyamira. We have with us as well the senator of West Pokot, Samuel Pogisio. We do have with the governor of Kisumu as well, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. And we do have also with us the member of parliament from Daragwa. This is Jeremiah Kioni. We continue with the conversation. If you missed last week's, of course, headlines, don't worry, then I've got you covered. We shall be running that concurrently as we are speaking. First, taking a look at what was headlining the front pages of the dailies last week. And of course, from Monday last week, this was your headline last week, Uhuru to stop fuel cost rise. This is what Raila was saying last week. And of course, we're eagerly waiting for him also to see if he'll act on this as well. And some of the headlines that we had from other dailies as well were carrying the same story about fuel as well. So we want to hear from our panelists, which is the way forward and how do we curb this particular menace about the 16 VAT on petroleum products once and for all. Okongo Mogeni. Or you've not been affected by this. Maybe we should maybe we should look for alternatives for forms of fuel, biofuel.
Yeah, it's not just me is affected, but the people I represent. So we cannot shut our eyes to the reality on the ground that this 16% increase has really hit, the common mwananchi. And, we have had a revolution in the way people travel, especially in our rural areas.
Yes.
And the people who are living on less than $1, the mamambogas, the casual workers, back to the villages where we come from, rely on borders, the motorcycles as a means of transport. And I've been in my county for the better part of last week and the weekend. And these guys have already effected salary increases because they have told their customers that the fuel prices have gone up. So for us to make ends meet, we also must increase our fares. So really, this thing is eating the common manage. But I think Debarl, we have seen interventions at two levels. The first intervention is what the executive is trying to do through discussions with elected leaders. But I think one which has given us an immediate solution is a court order that was issued by Justice Riech in the High Court in Bungoma. And I can understand why the government and the bodies that are in charge of regulating prices on fuel and enforcing the 16% VAT have not respected that court order. Because, Debarl, as I saw Senator Wetangula was saying in the news caption, the jurisprudence in terms of respecting court order is that once a court order is issued, whether you agree or disagree with it, the first thing you're gonna do is to respect that court order. So I expected that by the time we begin this new week today, I will have seen the fuel prices going down at the pump. So the question I'm asking myself, is it that there are some people in this country who have perfected the art of impunity to the level that they cannot respect an order issued by a judge of the High Court? Two, if the minister in charge of finance, Rotich, has become aware of this order, because I know the jurisprudence now, what the courts have now said is you don't need to be served personally. Once you become aware of a court order, and I've seen this order, what I've read is that it has already been extracted, it has been served upon the government. I think by now the government should have issued a directive and said, because the court has issued an order stopping the implementation of the 16% levy, we will withdraw that implementation, awaiting the hearing of both parties, what we call, in legal terms, inter partes hearing. I mean, it worries me, and I don't know what my panelist will say, that somebody sitting in a government office who, going by the provisions of Chapter 6, should be respecting the rule of law, can, with impunity, just refuse to comply with a court order. It worries me. Yes.
Right. Does it worry you, Samuel Pogiso?
Well, it does. It does. This, for lawyers tell us, and senior lawyers like Mogeni has said, I cannot doubt that, because, and then I've heard Honorable Tagula say the same. A court order is a court order. And then it worries us again that the conflict is in the laws and cannot be sorted out, so that it is clear. If somebody goes to court to stop something, the first thing is they stop it, and then you argue your case later. And I'm not even a lawyer yet. Let me also just say that this country, on fuel, as has been said, fuel is not a luxury per se. It's the cars and the aeroplanes which are, and the boats which are luxurious. But you know, fuel is needed to move the very poor people with tuk-tuks and with borders. And I tell you that these things have come to help, and if fuel is going to be increased at will. And we've been used to that. You know, the thing about our conscience is that we've been used to the up and down increases by the ERC. Up and down increases and so on, and then it goes up, and then when it's totally up, then the 16% VAT comes in. And you find that people really have been wondering, is there no one center for raising these taxes or for increasing these taxes and so on? The prices of fuel have suffered the most. And, but finally, what are we doing about our own oil in Kenya? We have oil from Turkana, and I can see that we are not yet moving it fast enough so that we can actually have this oil come back to us. And I think that we should quickly look at ways of getting the oil to be used by Kenyans. But finally, it's also not fair that Kenya, which is the route for exporting oil to other countries, has the highest price of fuel, when the countries that even pay taxes to import through Kenya can afford to sell their oils cheaper. And that's the irony of all these things.
Right. Governor?
Well, I think we should go back to the principles we set when we did the economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation. You don't tax people who are not making money. You tax people who are making money. Secondly, the major principle of taxation in a developing society like ours is that you should broaden the tax base and reduce the tax rate. The government seems to be narrowing the tax base and increasing the tax rate. We know, for example, that if certain policy measures are taken, for example, stop the importation of sugar, increase the production of sugar, you'll get more people making money within the country whom you can tax, producers of sugar and those who are working the sugar plantations.
Yes.
Than at the moment where people import sugar and they avoid taxation by having ships at the coast who are which are lingering there in the high seas, and then they offload the sugar into some boats which come and load them into the market without being taxed. Those are the things you should worry about than begin taxing the few people who are making money internally and bleeding them to death so that the economy does not grow. You see, what Senator is saying, if then somebody with a factory is now paying more for transporting his goods to Mombasa for export, it means that they're going to cut down on certain expenses like employment, you see. And then if somebody goes out of a job, you can't tax them because they don't have money. So this measure is basically progressive. Then I see that what the government is aiming to do is to raise 70 billion shillings by increasing the VAT. This 70 billion shillings you can easily get by cutting down expenditures in the military. Some of the equipment we're buying, which is not necessary. You see, you can cut it down by cutting down on certain luxurious expenditures in government.
Yes.
This 70 billion shillings is not a basis for in introducing VAT. I don't think so. Like my friend Tuju says in the paper today, he's quite right. If Parliament rejects a taxation regime, then they have to remove some budgetary allocations, sure. And the first budgetary allocation to be removed, I think, is from the military and the NIS where previously the money was not even audited. I think recently they said it should be audited. I don't know whether it's being audited effectively, but that's where the hole is. So plug the holes rather than increase the taxation.
Right, the confidential accounts that we normally know in this country where we do not know how that money is being spent. That's where also we have our biggest loophole in losing this money. It is interesting that you raised the question of buying equipment, because on page 3, I think page 4 of the Standard, you have here what they say that the military, if maybe just pick it up, side by story, military acquires 4 aircrafts. And it says the military has bought 4 reconditioned helicopters from the United Arab Emirates. The aircraft will be deployed in Somalia to step up the fight against. This is page 6 actually of a Standard. It's a side by story there.
Do you have an extra?
And it says the aircraft will be deployed. It will be deployed in Somalia to step up the fight against Al-Shabaab insurgents. I've got a copy here of a Standard as well. Yeah, we can cross it. So this is what we are talking about. If you're trying to raise taxes here, we're still spending this money in Somalia. Maybe we should also question, you know, the expenditure that we do have sustaining our military in Somalia. Right now, we know even the US is pulling out troops from Somalia because now they're training off their focus on China and Russia as opposed to terrorists. This is with the new policy or the new foreign, of course, policy. We can discuss a bit about that. How do we help the country, you know, to really plug the holes that we do have in terms of really raising revenue? Let's hear from Jermakioni.
Thank you, Debarl. I think it is important for us to note or recall that this VAT on petroleum products was passed during the 11th Parliament. That was like 5 years ago. That is when the increment was supposed to have taken place, but it was put off for 2 years, and again another 2 years, I'm told, and there is now another proposed amendment that is supposed to put it away off for another 2 years. So it's something that has been in the books for the last 5 years. And talking to persons within, I think, Treasury or elsewhere, they say that this was necessitated by the demand for developmental projects, which includes some of those which I expect to happen within my constituency, Daragwa. But I think it is it's important. It's crucial also to note that these are increments that are passed by Parliament, 11th Parliament. So even as we want to blame Treasury, we also need to remain aware of the fact that the amendments that have been, or there are provisions that have been passed in the 2013 VAT Act. And but now there is an amendment that is pending before, I hope, before the President for him to assent or to direct otherwise. But I think also it's important in my thinking that levying VAT or taxes on fuel and on payee are the easiest and perhaps the easiest way of revenue collection in a country. And what I think this calls for is for those within government to become innovative, imaginative, and like Professor says, expand the tax base. Look for other areas where we can tax. There are quite a number of Kenyans within the SMEs who are doing very well, but I doubt whether they are paying taxes. And if we were to look for ways of bringing them on board, we would increase our tax base and reduce perhaps the levels of taxation. It is important that we make sure that the investors who have already come into the country, including the car manufacturing or assembly lines that were, I think, came during the first term of Jubilee, are encouraged to expand and to even perhaps attract others into the country. But if we tax at that level, we are certainly going to see a few of them leave the country. We will certainly lose employment, and it has a negative impact overall. And I think the other thing, Debarl, that we may need to look at is I hear that one of the things that we would want to do in the coming days is to do a dual carriage from Mombasa to Nairobi. And it doesn't sound a bad idea. But having done SGR just the other day, you wonder whether that is what we want to do right away. I think it's a project that can wait until we have reached at that level of economic growth which can support it. So there's a little bit of duplication of projects here and there. Knowing that we have flights to Mombasa, quite regular flights. We have now the SGR, and again we want to do another dual carriageway. I think we may want to invest that money in another area, open new avenues where there is potential room for taxation, and where we can look for incentives to bring in more investors. So I think there's a little bit of thinking that needs to be put here. But perhaps as my final comment on that, before we allow another of the panelists, is a little bit more work needed to have been done, I believe, by the Budget Committee. When we were, when the Budget Committee was looking at areas that we need to invest, or areas that need to be funded, and where money needs to come from, how much money needs to go where, that is where the balancing would have been done. And I don't see the 70 billion shillings as a huge amount of money in our budget. It's very easy to adjust and cover it in other areas. Not just by doing away with the wastage, which is quite high in our country, and the corruption tendencies that we have, but also by prioritizing things and avoiding a little bit of robbing. One of the things that I keep asking is, we as members of Parliament are required, I will use that word, required, to do what they call the IT hubs. Is it in every constituency? In every constituency. And these constituencies include the ones in town, where there is already good coverage of, and if you look at the amount of money that will go into that aspect alone, it could easily do half of this, 70 billion. And we've been back and forth with the board, the CDF board, as what is the rationale. But when you listen to it, you actually you are told that during the budget making process, there were people who were busy robbing for that project to be included in and to be included in the budget. And when you see people robbing at the budget level for an aspect, for an activity to be done across the country, you can already see interest, and you have to be very careful of some of these things. That's one area. And I'm told also there is some other aspect in health that are being robbed by persons in the private sector. And if we were careful to deal with these 70 billion shillings, we could easily have listed by just being careful with the kind of budget that we did. And not to say that the Budget Committee did not do a good job, but I believe that this is something that would have been addressed at that level. And you could, even within Parliament, I think you could see some disconnect.
Is our Assets Recovery Agency doing enough a good job in terms of making sure these assets are recovered, and they put tails also on some of these investigations that we do have? Because if we try and look at all these scandals that we've had and added all that, if we can get an aggregate, that can easily offset these 70 billion shillings that we're talking about, isn't it, Dr. James Sika?
Well, I think you start from there. You're talking about management of our resources and trying to recover what has been lost. Yes. And I agree with you. To my knowledge, I really don't get any records of where assets that have been lost, monies that have been totally stolen, brought back. So that's basically one area that one would look at. But there is an element that the Honorable Kony has brought, which is the budget process. This money can be found within the budget without touching the fuel. You know, fuel, energy, particularly fuel, is the wheels and the feet on which the economy moves. You touch it, and literally everything will stop. People in the markets can't buy, the borders can't move, the food will go up. It's chaotic. So that's not the area you can touch. So there are many other areas. And I've noticed what he's saying, that in the budget process, there is so much lobbying that actually you feel that there are business interests that are being brought into the budget from outside and lobbying hard so that monies go into certain areas with perhaps business interests that are already interred into the system. I think those are areas that if we look at, we can actually meet this. I think the budget process, if looked at, And if we go into managing the resources that we have, we can get this money without touching this. But I also want to look at the history of the 2013. My colleagues may remember that these are a series of laws that actually were very controversial. And I think in some instances, the opposition actually walked out and said these things will be passed in their absence. And it was predicted even at that time that there was this VAT, there was the energy laws, and there were also some VAT on even food items that were really, really controversial. If you go into the Hansard, you will find that these were vehemently opposed. But they were passed, and I think here the tyranny of numbers may actually have an influence on this. And then it was postponed.
Yes.
And when we came to this new finance bill, which is actually implementing the legal measures to bring in the tax, it was actually not in, and the argument was this finance bill is not touching VAT, which I don't think was very really transparent, because it was clear that in September 1, it is coming into being and is going to affect everything. And so it was left quietly. In fact, it is Parliament that actually brought it in to make an amendment to say we are going to cap this, because it was clear the Treasury was not going to suspend it one more time.
All right, but
I'll end up by saying, within the budget, we can make priorities and touch on areas that do not touch, that leave fuel alone. We can manage our resources and look at areas where we have lost and get enough funds to cover for this. We can also look at other areas of energy. We have our own petroleum that is coming. We need to develop that first. And sometimes I'm worried, can we go the Nigerian way, the Venezuelan way, where you actually have your own fuel, but still it is so expensive that people cannot afford it. Now, wind energy is another area we're looking at. So I would leave fuel alone. I would get other areas in the budget and manage the resources in such a way that we can close this gap.
Okongo Mugini, I want us to really center also our focus on the asset recovery, because I believe even if we look at the budget itself and we can actually get an aggregate amount and try and offset this. And of course, a large portion of other expenses that are needed in this country that where we are lacking money. But looking also at what has been drawn today, I think this is, let me just walk over there and try and put it up for you so that you can see. This is in the Star. This is what Victor has drawn for us today. I'll walk over there and just put it up because I think we were on... this is IMF and President Uhuru. The way is now so entangled here with the loans. Foreign experts managing us because we cannot manage foreign debts. We're really tangled up with this loans issue right now. And I think it's a critical stage that we're reaching as a country, that we need to have a public debate on the national debt, because now we're tinkering on a crisis as well. You know, people are just talking a good game about it, then it tapers off for a while, but we need to like squarely look at this particular menace in the eye and comment on it as well. So asset recovery within the country, hand in pail or pail in hand, you know, to the Bretton Woods institutions as well. It doesn't make any lick of sense, does it?
Yeah, I think first, Debarl, you know, if you look at some laws that we passed in this country, we deliberately gave some bodies powers to recover either stolen money or engage in activities that can have what lawyers would call plea bargaining mechanisms, where the state is able to recover money that has been stolen from the allocation coffers. And I'll give you an example of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, where I think the budget, allocation budget has now hit maybe 6 billion by Parliament. Now, the annual report by that organization is supposed to inform Kenyans how much money and assets that institution has recovered in each financial year, so that you can see whether there is good value for money in terms of the budget that is allocated to EACC. But I've not seen, you know, instances where the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, liaising with the DPP, engages in a plea bargain mechanism where you can recover money and increase the government collection other than just looking at ensuring that people who have robbed this country are sent to jail. And I'll tell you, Debarl, that if you read some of these other countries out there, if you are involved in a corrupt tender, and that tender was for about 20 billion, you are fined 5 times the value of that tender. But in this country, we have put a lot of concentration on going to court, prosecuting people, and sending them to jail. Look at last year, we passed a law, tax amnesty, and then we said people who have stashed money out of the country will be given a tax amnesty so that that money can be brought back to this country. Have we seen any of this money coming back? We haven't. Go to the issue of, traffic fines. In countries like the UK, the UK government will tell you that traffic fines, money that is gotten from the traffic fines, is what is used to maintain roads in the UK. But in this country, the policemen who are on our roads each day are there to collect bribes. If you ask them to account, you stay on these roads from 6 to 6 p.m. and you say, how much fines have we collected as a country? You will find that this money is collected by that policeman, ends up to the OCS hospital, and I'm told it comes up to the headquarters in Nairobi. And I was talking to somebody from EACC when they paid a courtesy call to us at the Senate, and they said, what do we do when the government has given the traffic policemen AK-47 guns on the roads, has ethics and corruption? The most we can have are just pistols. So the government has actually made it impossible, even for ethics and corruption, to deal with corruption within the traffic police. And I'm telling you, it is this small indiscipline, these avenues of corruption that we have created that makes it impossible for this country to collect enough revenue to sustain us. So unless we have a paradigm shift, we'll always have challenges. Debarl, if you find that somebody influenced his way in getting a tender, we should have a mechanism of saying, we will fine you 3 times the value of that tender, as a way of letting you off the hook in the criminal trial. Because we're not plea bargaining on cases of murder. We're looking at corruption and economic crimes, whereby you make it very painful for people to engage in corruption, but also you make it to be something that is, advantageous to the government, in that you are able to seal that loophole for corruption, but again, you ensure that the government is able to reap some benefit from that malpractice. I think unless the country becomes innovative, we'll still continue having challenges in meeting our revenue targets. So my conclusion is, let's deal with the issues of corruption, issues of indiscipline. Let us have a debate on how we loop in every player that should assist the government in collecting revenue. Putting 16% tax on fuel is not an answer to our challenges on tax collection.
All right. Let's hear from Pogisio.
Well, the buck still moves back to Parliament, because if you don't strengthen your Parliament, if the Parliament is not strong enough, doesn't have the backbone to really stand for what its job is, we have issues. And one of the things that brings which is the biggest weakness in Kenya is the so-called tyranny of numbers. That really is the biggest, because with your tyranny of numbers, you kind of flow with the executive, and you approve things even not knowing sometimes the effect of those. Number 2 is the excitement right after elections, when you think that the executive can take advantage of the members of Parliament at that time, when they just knew, and a raft of laws can be passed then. Of course, there is the fear of the end term coming elections and so on. The other one, of course, what we need really is citizens. I always say we need more of charters in this country, because citizens who scrutinize legislation, who scrutinize orders, and go to court and say this is wrong. And we need more citizens like that, because in many other countries where there is the citizens who rescue, when the politicians are more compromised, it's the citizenry through whatever means that comes in to help us sort out these things. But more importantly, it is the person at the helm of the treasury. You know, we've had so many regimes, and usually the treasury is the most important. So the person at the helm of the treasury has to be totally judged. Is he weak or strong? And his policies, are they weak or strong? Is it easier for monies to be lost under this person or not? And citizens should then begin to raise their voices. And I don't want to pass any judgment on Rotich, but you have to compare his regime, his time at the treasury with the times of other ministers at the treasury. And then, of course, strengthen the Senate. This is going to be the call: strengthen the Senate, give the Senate the abilities to go down to the counties and also do the oversight activities there, which is actually lacking right now. Because now a lot of the money is going down to Professor Nyang's treasury and the county treasuries. And then the mechanism for oversight is lacking. And so we need to think of everything. But to come back to our issue, I believe that there is monies that can be reorganized to save Kenyans from this taxation, this high taxation. It doesn't matter, the law was passed many years ago. Whatever the law is, it can be amended. The law was passed many years ago. The members of parliament have the conscience to now put pressure. The same tyranny of numbers should put pressure on their government to reverse these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just,
please.
The brother was drawing your attention to page 8 of the East African.
Page 8 of the East African? Yes.
Which says higher taxes across the region will stifle economic growth and slow investments. Exactly what I was saying. So just not in Kenya, but in East Africa. And I have a feeling that there was another article, I think in another paper, which was accusing the IMF for putting pressure on our countries to do this kind of taxation. Now, the first paragraph is very important. East African families and businesses are feeling the heat of increased taxes as government looks for easier ways of raising money to finance persistent budget shortfalls and fund infrastructure projects. Look, infrastructure projects are okay, but you have to fund them in such a way that you don't have to tax your people. For example, if you're going to build the double carriageway from Mombasa to Nairobi, you can do it on build, operate and transfer, BOT. You don't need to put out a huge outlay of money to do it. But if you insist that you must pay for it, of course you'll have to tax your people. But if it on a BOT basis, somebody will bring in the money, invest it, operate it for about 10 years, and hand it over to you. Now, what's wrong with that? You kill two birds with one stone. And many countries have done that. So I have a feeling that this easier way of raising money because you want to finance infrastructure projects, just because you're not imaginative enough to know better ways of doing the same thing, but without taxing your people. I think it's very important to note that. Yes. Secondly, which I think is important too, look, this country, during the NAC government, did not have to raise taxes. Yeah. But it had to bring in more people to pay tax.
Yes.
And by the way, when you reduce the rate of taxation, you induce people to pay taxes. More people will do so. And you will get the same amount of money without penalizing a few productive enterprises and productive individuals who are laying the golden egg. You see, the goose that lays the golden egg, don't starve it of food. Give it more food so that more golden egg can be laid. So I have a feeling that we should, like Senator Pogisho says, not just tie down ourselves because this law was passed 5 years ago. Let us reflect where we are today. What must we do? Can't we revise some of the mistakes we made 5 years ago? So that's my plea. And by the way, we in counties, for example, what I'm trying to do in my county is exactly to broaden the tax base. I know that there are a lot of people trading in town who don't pay anything. If you make those people pay, you'll get more money locally and you'll not have to rely too much on the treasury, because in the final analysis, what you need is resources to develop both the national government and the county government.
All right. Let's hear from Jeremiah Kioni. Then we tackle what he had raised about the creative ways of raising revenue, because I think there are many ways, and we can discuss one of which after you.
Yeah, and I did mention a little bit earlier that the easiest way, in my opinion, to raise revenue is to deal with payee and VAT on petroleum. You don't need to be very imaginative. You really don't need to wake up in the middle of the night to think of how to deal with those issues. Something that you can just do in the morning as you wake up, and there will be money coming your way. And some of these practices will find our way, or find the we will be laboring with them like we are doing this morning, for the reasons that at times when Kenyans are called to make decisions, they don't allow themselves to think all the way to the end. And I am saying this in agreement with the Senator. When you talk about tyranny of numbers, I know Nyikal would want to talk about tyranny of brains, which is really something that is in doubt. You only talk about, you only try to ring that bell when there is some doubt in what you are saying.
But that is debatable, whether it's in the National Assembly or the Senate.
Well, whichever way, it's not anything that holds water. It's only that one side would want to talk about it more, the other one would want to practice. But the crucial thing I wanted to say is that when Kenyans have been called to vote, if I'm running for the office of the presidency, I would be very happy to have majority in parliament. And every other party that wants to win the executive and win the control of parliament. And if possible, judiciary. And that is normal when you're looking for power. But for the benefit of the voters, they are always better with a hung parliament, with a hung Senate. If we had a hung parliament, there would be more thoughts put on these issues. People would be called to debate more, and the contribution of members would make sense. Presence in committees will be based on merit, what you can bring on the table, and what kind of thoughts you are likely to help your side of the divide argue their case, because then we'll be testing on the issues of tyranny of might when you have a hung parliament. But when you do not have, when you have a majority on one side, the other side will literally keep saying that they have better minds, for the reason that they are the ones who keep talking, while others have kept quiet. And they have not kept quiet because they don't know what needs to be done. But it is because, really, you can say it, you may not say it, the end result is the same. By this I'm trying to tell Professor that we also can master enough brains to talk about some of these issues with a some good level of competence. But if you are if the numbers already guarantee you one way, you also don't want to go wasting a lot of time on the floor saying things that don't need to be, are not quite useful. You just go on the record. But I am talking about when we are voting, when Kenyans are deciding whether it is my side of the political divide or the other side of the minority that may remain in the minority for a while, it is important that the numbers are near equal. That way, you members of parliament, members of Senate exercise their minds and you compete on ideas, and the best ideas will find their way in the executive, and this kind of taxes would not have come our way if we had really exercised. And that is what happened in the NAC government. And I was in the 10th parliament. And you could not wake up and say, we are going to pass this. You wake up to think, how do I engage my colleagues on the other side and get the best out of this idea? And that I think will be very useful for this country. I enjoy when you have a hung parliament. It keeps the executive on its toes, and the best of members of parliament is heard. You end up with the best leadership in the country, but not the leadership that you master by punching tarmacs, punching roads, and you end up, you go nowhere. I sympathize with Professor when he's talking about broadening tax base in Kisumu. You ask what other counties thinking about when you see. I mean, it really is just an embarrassment. Side shows that don't help us. Right. Is really what is giving us these unnecessary taxation levels.
Maybe we need to look at the Unclaimed Financial Asset Authority. Because the last time we checked, the Unclaimed Financial Asset Authority was holding almost 30 billion shillings. right? And we've not seen even Rotich himself coming to the fore and tell us, yes, there's this unclaimed financial assets that is being stashed, or it is with the Unclaimed Financial Asset Authority that can actually have these 70 billion shillings that we're actually seeking, right? That could be another way, creatively thinking on how we can actually peg this particular hole instead of going back to, you know, wananchi and levying taxes on the fuel products. I don't know what you think about this financial, because I think there has been no much clarity on what Unclaimed Financial Asset Authority is all about, because this is holding some of the assets that have not been claimed by Kenyans. But we don't see them doing enough a good job in terms of making sure that the public knows how to access these particular assets. And we wonder then, yes, if it's holding all these particular monies, then what do they do with it in terms of investment? What really happens? So these are things that we need to talk about when you're talking about creatively thinking on how we can plug this particular hole. I don't know. Let's hear from Congo Mogeni.
Yeah.
30 billion shillings, that's half of what the Treasury is seeking.
You know, Debarl, what you are doing is passing a vote of no confidence on Rotich. Because you're simply saying Rotich cannot think outside the box. And you know, there was a screaming story on, you know...
The Master of Debt.
Yeah.
That was on Saturday.
The Standard on Saturday.
Yes.
And you know, I'm thinking...
Just hold it for the cameras.
You know.
Yeah? Camera 8.
Yeah.
The Master of Debt, yes.
Yeah. And
okay, that's okay.
You see, I can understand the challenges of tyranny of numbers. But you know, as I'm just sitting here, I'm reflecting and wondering, what goes through the mind of our president, Uhuru Kenyatta, when he listens to these panelists, when he reads these newspapers? And for sure you can, even you, Debarl, just in this AM Live, you already are looking for a solution for Rotich in money from unclaimed assets. Now, I wonder, does Rotich ever think outside the box? Or he just wants to go for this easy way of punishing, you know, poor Kenyans? And I think in many jurisdictions, in many countries, when a minister who has been given a very key docket, like this one of finance, is not able to perform, the best way is for the president to fire him and look for somebody else who can come on board and think innovatively, who can bring on board the ideas that you're trying to bring on the table this morning. But Rotich is just a typical man. I'm told he found the debt you talked about, he found it at 1.7 trillion. And in 5 years, he's taken it to 5 trillion. Just imagine. The tax on fuel, when he took over, was at 27 shillings. Now, per liter, that is. Now we are at 57 shillings. Is this minister serving the interests of this country? Somebody is saying he's practicing, maybe Kioni will tell us, Voodoo economics. So I think the problem is the person who is in the kitchen, the person who is cooking, I think he's run short of ideas. He's been in this job, I think, for 7 years now. It's high time that we look for somebody else. And Kioni has said this morning that they also have tyranny of brains in Jubilee.
Of course,
but things are even better now, because with the handshake, you can actually go to the real area.
There can be a cross-pollination now.
They can go to NASA where there is a tyranny of brains.
Just to come to the defense of Rotich, not because I don't agree with my friend Mogeni, but you know, there must be certain institutional lapses or institutional arrangements that make Treasury work better. When we created the National Economic and Social Council, it was for a reason. Yes. To give the Treasury, ourselves in planning, for example, a body we can go to for advice, and we can check some of the proposals we are making, whether they are viable or not. Now, the Jubilee government decided to do away with the National Economic and Social Council. No wonder Rotich has no body he can go to, because the cabinet is not enough to... The Rotich is part of the cabinet. So you need another body altogether of civilian people who know, not just from Kenya, but from the international environment, who can tell you, box, this thing you are doing, you can do it in another way. It has been done like this in Bolivia. It has been done like this in Estonia, you know. So I think some of the institutions that have been abolished in the Jubilee government are actually led us to this kind of position. But finally, let me just make a comment to Maria Kioni's comment, which I think is very important, the importance of a hung parliament. It's very difficult to get a hung parliament in a presidential system. But in a parliamentary system, it is. And that's why I've been advocating for a parliamentary system in this country. Ever since independence, if you look at the reason why we have got into trouble.
That has been your mantra when you come to the show. Yeah, I've discovered.
It is, but you look at Britain.
Yes.
Britain has more or less a hung parliament. Look at Germany. But if the chancellor in Germany is not really a president, he's a prime minister, just like in South Africa. So we really must relook at our system of governance and see whether we can make certain changes which will make this country better governed. We make this country have a more rapid economic and social development than we have at the moment. But if we keep on burying ourselves heads in the sand, every time we have an election, when we wake up, who's going to be the next president, we begin campaigning for so-and-so running around the country like a headless chicken, it's not going to help us.
Right. Let's say from Pogeso, then we'll come to you.
No, yes. Exactly.
I'm not getting a fair share.
And I agree with what the professor is saying. And the changes is basically to say that it's due. The changes are due. Anytime now we should be able to make changes in our constitution and so on. And so we can bring in whatever he's saying depending on what Kenyans feel. But as I've said before, the level, the person at the head of the treasury is a very important person. Why was NESC removed? Why was the National Economic and Social Council removed? It's still there in paper, but it's been dead. It's been dead. But when under the last government, we had representations on the NESC from Singapore. We had representations from what are the foreign countries?
From Britain.
From everywhere.
Britain, yeah.
The reason being that we got tapped all those brains.
Malaysia.
Yeah. In fact, that's why we're talking about nuclear power at some point, and thinking things outside of the box. But coming back to Rotich and his dead, what do you call it? I don't know what the voodoo is, but basically dead end. Because the rich is reached the end of his rope, basically. Now, what do you do when it comes to the country now suffering at the level of that? I'm back to Parliament, and back to a reverse use of the tyranny of numbers. The members of the Jubilee side, and of course now that there is a handshake, it's even a bigger tyranny of numbers, should therefore now work for the people. It is midterm now. There's no election anywhere. It's midterm now. Nobody to worry about where they are. We should all now work for the ordinary person and put pressure on the same government that we are on to care more about losses in the treasury, care more about this debt, care more about the common person suffering, and bring down the, this as a thing that I must say, and it's something I'm not my own creation, but it is not the quality of our living that's more important. It is the quality of our life. And if you look at our people, if you look at the poor Kenyan, you really have to up your game. And I think we don't come to these shows just for talk show. I hope somebody's listening to us, that you really need to up your game. We must do everything to improve the lives, the quality of life of our people, much more than even these things that we do. You know, when I look at the so-called infrastructure projects that have been done, that we keep talking about all the time, we've done this road and we've done that. Look at the quality of that road.
Thank you. Right, thank you.
Yeah, what has really come out here is that as our treasury been innovative and looking outside just two things, borrowing and tax. And you brought yourself two issues, asset recovery, unclaimed assets, and other areas that we can look at. And I remember in the 11th Parliament when this issue of Eurobond came, again you looked at it and we said, this is just another borrowing that is coming into place. So, and you see, there is the executive seems to work just treasury, parliament executive. You do not see the involvement of the bigger society, the academicians, the business who are more positive. And Professor talks of the NESC. But now we have something called IBEC, that is Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. But you don't find it bringing more people, bringing live debate on how can we improve things. So I think where we are today, there's need to just look outside the three institutions of governance and look where else can we get this information, where else can we get advice so that we can go ahead. And coming to Parliament, I actually, I mentioned earlier that the tyranny of numbers. If somebody goes to 2013, when this law actually came into place, there was a lot of controversy, and the issue of tyranny of numbers came. And as we are going forward, the president has come back. We do not know what they are going to do. If he now says that he's not giving consent and brings this back to Parliament, then again we are going to be faced with the issue, can Parliament look at itself as Parliament and not Parliament, part of the executive, Parliament with the opposition, and say this is what is good for Kenya? Had we looked at that in 2013, we wouldn't have gotten into this.
Jeremiah Kioni.
Yeah, one, I think the law allows us to, even as it is, and I may need to be corrected with it, but I think even as it is, the law allows us.
This serves you as your closing remarks as well.
Oh, I didn't know you.
Yes.
Allowed me just to close up. I just came and I'm closing. But I wanted, I think the law, even as it is now, Rotish can still lower the tax on VAT to 12%. I think the law allows him to reduce it by 25%, even before going back to Parliament. But also to say that the handshake is good. It is helping us, in my opinion, to fight corruption without people running to one side of this side to say the tyranny, the other side to run to Baba and the rest. Because if that had happened, this corruption thing would have been, war would have been lost. But also to say that, of course, tyranny of numbers comes when the other party doesn't work very hard to get the numbers. But outside those, I think we can also, there are many things that are covered by their papers and are good things, including what Professor is doing in Kisumu, embracing technology. But we have also the issue of equalization fund that has been now directed at areas even in Nyikal's place, including Daragwa. We have people who also need to benefit from this equalization. There are policies that were meant to achieve us something different from what we are achieving. But as I conclude, this issue of parliamentary system versus presidential system, that Professor Nyang and Senator Pogiso will always make a point of mentioning every Monday morning, just like Farah would have said something. Though I'm getting a little bit persuaded, we need to put our minds into it. I think it helps, but we need to be careful as to why is it that we landed where we are. There are issues that drove us where we are, not where perhaps we wanted to be.
Thank you.
But we need to engage in that debate a little bit more in the coming days.
Thank you. My
condolences to Professor Godias for family. He helped me get, he's passed on.
Is that right? Yes. Thank you.
He helped me get a college in my constituency, a wonderful Kenyan who's left us.
Oh, Paul.
Right, thank you. Governor.
Yeah, Paul to Godias family. I didn't know that he had passed on. But just to my last comments, I think what really is coming out is for the Jubilee government to rethink its strategy for developing this nation, because this taxation crisis is a crisis. Petroleum is not something you touch easily just by the drop of a pen. You have to think very carefully that sectors it is going to affect. It's going to affect many sectors in our economy, and adversely too, not in a positive manner. So I hope that the government will sit down and reflect on this issue very carefully.
Thank you. Ogisio.
Well, allow me to mourn the demise of my professor, Joseph Omamuga, who passed on, I think this week or last week, together with Anyang. I think, I don't know whether he found him at Makerere. But
he was my professor, yes. My condolences too. Yeah.
Condolences to him. And I think that my closing remarks is just normally let's strengthen the National Assembly and the Senate.
Thank you. Thank you. Okongo Mogeni, briefly.
Yeah, mine just to a small comment on the story I saw on the Star on Saturday. Speakers are at the mercy of members of county assemblies, and the quarrel is control of multi-million tenders, influence of staff recruitment. I think we need to look for ways of protecting our speakers in the county assemblies. Yeah.
Thank you very much. James,
mine is this: it is time for Parliament in this situation to look at working on behalf of the people and not behalf of either the executive or the parties. What is good for the people is what Parliament now has to look at in this crisis.
Right, thank you. I want to thank you, our panelists this morning. Thank you very much for your valued input this morning in terms of, trying to shape, the perception where this country is headed to. And I hope someone is listening to what our panelists are saying this morning. Just to read one of your tweets, we have King saying Jeremiah Kioni has exposed a very key point. Some of items included in budgets were lobbied by some key business people, like Internet Hub. In every constituency, this item was allocated 35 billion shillings. For what? It is a way of looting Tenderpreneur's budget. That's it. Thank you very much for your valued company. Living with Us is up next.